Hello everybody, the Nameless Narcissist here, once again, a simple man diagnosed with MPD, giving you the facts on narcissistic personality disorder and things that go on in my head. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, but keep in mind, I am no clinician. I can only speak to my own experiences. So, sadism. Interesting thing, right? The pleasure of hurting other people, usually for some kind of gratification through exerting power over somebody, right? And how does this correlate with narcissism? I want to say, I looked for a lot of research on this. I did not find much, which really surprised me. I know that there's a link between narcissism and aggression that I still need to look into, but I want to make a distinction between aggression and sadism, right? Because I'm frustrated about something, I can be aggressive towards somebody, maybe to get what I want in some cases, or because I'm frustrated, or I feel like I'm under attack first, right? That's aggression, but I'm not getting any kind of pleasure out of it. It's a means to an end, or it's an emotional reaction. Sadism is exerting control and harm over somebody for the pleasure and for the sake of that. So I have always kind of been against pathologizing abuse in a lot of ways, because I always think it's going to be used as an excuse, and I only view mental disorders through the lens of how can we treat this. And most abusers aren't willing to really, get treated. So I really think it only has use through if there is an actual possibility of treating them. Which is why I'm always very skeptical talking about the ties between narcissism and sadism. But while I was looking into this stuff, I remembered sadistic personality disorder. It was a proposed personality disorder, mainly by Theodore Milton. And it was also in the appendix of the DSM-3R, I want to say. And when looking into this, I think it brings up some interesting points that are very relevant to this conversation. Because, first of all, this is not a well-established disorder, right? There's not a bunch of research validating it. And that's one of the reasons why it wasn't included in later editions of the DSM. I don't know if I mentioned that, but yeah, it's not in it anymore. But what I find even more interesting and kind of proves my point of why I get worried about talking about sadism or abuse in the context of pathology is that in later editions of the DSM, and this is quoting Wikipedia, by the way, I found a link referencing this a little bit ago, but I fucking lost it. The later versions of the DSM do not include it. It was removed as psychiatrists believed it to be used to legally excuse sadistic behavior, which I think that's a really, really good point, because I'm not sure how that's used in context of antisocial personality disorder. I thought that they sometimes actually get worse sentences, so maybe they were wrong in that assumption. But I think that does back up my points of some of the downfalls of pathologizing traits like this. And also we gotta think, is sadism a pathological trait? Probably, but given that pathology is defined by what is the norm, right? And I guess most people would agree that sadism is outside the norm and probably something crazy people do. But, who's to really say what that is? Anyways, but I did end up finding one study that did talk about narcissism and sadism. Well, not specifically. It basically measured some of the other traits, pathologies, and personality disorders that go along with sadistic personality disorder. And this I found really interesting. First of all, I'm sure you guys can guess, they have a billion axis 1 disorders. They have an average of 4 per person or something, like 4 axis 1s and 4 personality disorders. So yeah, these people are nuts if they have sadistic personality disorder. Conduct disorder, substance abuse disorder, major depression was a big one. Those are probably the big 3, but most of them have more than that. Then we get to look at the personality disorders, and you guys might actually be surprised by this. It honestly surprised me, because when I was looking into stalking, I saw that there was, despite how much there was, you cannot sum up stalking by saying narcissist stalk, right? But there were significant narcissistic traits in a lot of people who were stalkers. And I kind of expected a similar grounds with this, right? You want to see a lot of comorbidity between sadistic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. But narcissistic, though it was one of the though it was overrepresented, Jesus, in the sadistic group, it was one of the least common. Even histrionic was more common than narcissistic in this group, which is really weird, right? Can you imagine a histrionic being sadistic? That seems kind of buck wild. And borderline was even more significant than both of them. The narcissistic of the cluster Bs was actually the least prevalent. There was a huge amount of overlap with antisocial, and they hypothesized that it's due to flaws in the diagnostic criteria itself for antisocial and sadistic. I probably should have read the diagnostic criteria for sadistic personality disorder, shouldn't I have? I think this will be really interesting. And I think this is a good definition of sadism in general, though, not just as a personality trait. I mean, not just as a personality pathology, because all of these things, I'm like, oh, this is like the kind of abuse I hear people talk about all the time in the community, in communities like this, like that my channel is part of, or other people's channels and stuff like that. And some of them like that I would read, I'd always be like, I would never do that. And maybe it's because they probably have more sadism than I do. Whatever. So has a pervasive pattern of cruel, demeaning, and aggressive behavior beginning by early adulthood as indicated by repeated occurrences of at least 4 of the following. And this has to be done towards multiple people, by the way. Has used physical cruelty or violence for the purpose of establishing dominance in a relationship, not merely to achieve some non-interpersonal goal, such as striking someone or to rob him or her. 2, humiliates or demeans people in the presence of others. 3, has treated or disciplined somebody under his or her control unusually harshly, e.g. a child, student, prisoner, or patient. See, I would never, that's the shit that pisses me off. If it's like under their care or control or something like that, and you're mistreating that person you're supposed to be responsible for, that will piss me off. I would never do some shit like that. Well, I guess care, not control always, but care, like a child, a student, or a patient. Prisoner, I guess that could be different. 4, is amused or takes pleasure in the psychological or physical suffering of others, including animals. 5, has lied for the purpose of harming or inflicting pain on others, not to merely achieve some other goal. And these are the, and I won't point out that like the parentheses, this is to distinguish it from antisocial personality disorder, I think, because like a lot of people with antisocial will do these things, but they don't care, they don't want to hurt people. They don't care really if they hurt people, but they don't want to hurt people. It's just a means to an end, right? For this, it's for the purpose of hurting. Gets other people to do what he or she wants by frightening them through intimidation or even terror. Restricts the autonomy of people who, with whom he or she has a close relationship. E.g., will not let spouse leave the house unaccompanied or permit teenage daughter to attend social functions. 8, is fascinated by violence, weapons, martial arts, injury, or torture. So that's sadistic personality disorder, and I think a pretty good indication of sadism as a personality trait. But also a really interesting thing as I go on with this, is the most common personality disorder that was associated with it, other than antisocial, was self-defeating personality disorder. So that paints a very interesting picture, and it noted, like in some other studies, I found this too. It paints a very interesting picture where not only are the people sadistic, they also like people being sadistic towards them, which paints a much more interesting and complex picture of these people, other than just kind of the monsters we view them as. As somebody who defends people who are usually referred to as monsters, I feel it's appropriate to kind of defend these people too, because I don't know enough about these types of people, right? I don't know how egocentric this is with all, I mean, sure, it's going to be egocentric to a certain degree, but I don't know how many of them do want help and stuff like that. And I like stuff like that because it's like, that does paint a more humanizing picture. The fact that it's not just domineering, it's also, they want to be hurt, and that's probably some kind of punishing behavior. But anyways, to wrap this up, I'm going to bring this back around to how I talked about stalking before, is that just because somebody has narcissistic traits in the context of abusive behaviors, stalking, sadism, whatever, I think we get too fixated on the narcissistic traits themselves. Just because they exhibit these kind of traits doesn't mean it's caused by the narcissism. And I feel like we kind of lose that sometimes. There's a dozen things, and like in behaviors like these extreme forms of abuse or in stalking, there's going to be such a hodgepodge of personality pathology or axis 1 disorders. I keep saying axis 1 disorders, even though axis 1 isn't even a thing anymore. other mental disorders, that it would be a misjustice just to call them a narcissist, just to say they have sadistic personality disorder even, I would argue. And I think we need to kind of separate those things. Yes, of course, stalkers do generally have more narcissistic traits, which does make sense, because of lack of accountability and entitlement. I think those things very well fit into the profile of somebody who is a stalker. But I would never stalk. I would be humiliated. I would be humiliated if I was like, that'd be humiliating to stalk somebody. And I've heard a lot of narcissists echo similar sentiments. So I do think it's something that's worth separating, right? It's not narcissism, it's a mixture of narcissism and a bunch of other traits that make a very difficult person to deal with. In the context of literally all abusive behavior, in my mind. Because I do want to differentiate hurting people, like, as a result of pathology and abuse, right? Because I've hurt a lot of people in my life, but every time I've hurt somebody, even if I've thought that they were overreacting, I took note of it and was like, well, I'll try not to do that again in the future. Like, I'd probably minimize what I did, but I would still be like, fine, I won't do it again, and try to prevent that hurt from happening again. It's abuse when you consistently, when you have a pattern of hurting people that you make no attempt to change or like have no desire to stop hurting people and stuff like that, in my mind. Anyways, but yeah, I was kind of all over the place today. I apologize. Hope you all have a good day. Take your fucking meds.